procedures. I want to bring in constitutional attorney and Victory News contributor Rick Green. Rick Green, let's start with the Second Amendment. Joe Biden was also stated as saying that no amendment to the Constitution is absolute. When I first heard that, I kind of did one of these and then realized, well, wait a minute, he's right. The 18th Amendment was repealed by the 21st Amendment. So there's a process and a way to do it.
I just wish, based on your previous story, I'd either had a, Chief Wahoo headdress handy, or maybe even, since I'm in Texas and grew up a Rangers fan, a cowboy hat, Rangers, badge, and a couple of six-shooters on my hips. I would have been appropriating, I guess, Cowboys of the previous generation. That might not be politically correct anymore. Anyway, sorry, I couldn't help but comment on that ridiculousness of the continued cancel culture. But it's hard to laugh at some of the other things that are being done because they have such an impact on our lives. I mean, the Constitution is now not absolute. The amendments are not absolutes. I wonder if Amendment 13 is not absolute for him. Does that mean some people can have slavery and other people can't? What about the 19th Amendment? Does that mean that, some women can't vote and some women can? And I mean, this guy's logic just makes no sense. And the fact that he's so focused on the metal, the plastic, the inanimate object, and whether or not it looks scary, or, whether or not it has a certain number of rounds, instead of focusing on actually making sure that government is protecting our rights. That's the only job of government, protect our rights. Instead, he wants to infringe on our rights and make it harder and harder for you or me to defend our families should the wolf show up at our door.
Well, it began back with the Washington basketball team. The Washington Bullets changed their names to Wizards. Somehow they got better. Yeah. But I want to go back to that constitutional thing, because we did do that. We had prohibition, the 18th Amendment. And they didn't remove it. It's still there. You can read it in a pocket constitution. But the 21st Amendment repealed that prohibition with alcohol. So it is possible that wasn't absolute, but there was a process to do it. You don't do it by executive order, correct?
That's right, and it allowed for federal involvement in the first place. The Second Amendment is actually saying no federal involvement on this issue of guns. I mean, to be blunt, there is no constitutional authorization for the ATF at all. There is no constitutional authorization for the federal government to have any limitations on firearms at all. That should be entirely a state issue based on what the Founding Fathers viewed. And even in the McDonald case before the Supreme Court, essentially the same thing was said with regard to the protection of those Second Amendment rights. So, yeah, way outside the bounds of what they should be doing. And again, it's all about philosophy. It's not about guns or not. It's about who should be able to defend themselves and their family. These people like Joe Biden think that only the government and only the police should be allowed to have firearms. That's where they really want to go with this.
That's right. So now let's go to what you just said about the language of the Second Amendment and the way it was written. Doesn't give any of that. And I agree with you. So that would require, to change it, it would require a constitutional convention of the states. Am I right?
It would require either that or an amendment offered by Congress. That's the way most amendments, all amendments have been done so far, is Congress proposes the amendment and then the states individually have to ratify. Yeah, the language is very clear, shall not be infringed. So if Joe Biden has his way, he needs an amendment that says can sometimes be infringed or something to that effect. The founders said it this way. They said if this right to keep and bear arms is in any way prohibited whatsoever, in any color or pretext, is the way St. George Tucker put it, who was the American Blackstone. They said if you do that, then liberty is in danger of being annihilated. So this was so important to them, they called it the palladium, the protector of all of our other liberties. And that means if you infringe on this one, you're allowing infringement on all of our other rights.
That's how serious it truly is. Thank you for explaining that to us, Rick Green. Mike, back to you.
Greg and Rick, you both need to listen to this. Just came down. Joe Biden has ordered a study via an executive order on the size of the U.S. Supreme Court and other possible changes. Once again, the president has ordered another executive order studying the size of the U.S. Supreme Court. We'll see how that plays out. All right, the U.S. government said on Thursday it had picked up nearly 19,000 children traveling alone across the Mexican border in March. Authorities say it is the largest monthly number ever recorded. The increase has coincided with the Biden administration's decision to exempt unaccompanied children from pandemic-related powers to immediately expel most people from the country without giving them an opportunity to seek asylum. Children are instead released to sponsors in the U.S., usually parents or close relatives, while being allowed to pursue their cases in heavily backlogged immigration courts. The Border Patrol encountered 18,663 unaccompanied children in March, well above the previous highs of 11,475 in May of 2019 and 10,620 in June of 2014. Well, Joe Biden's border crisis is ramping up again as nearly 19,000, as we said, unaccompanied children were nabbed jumping the border, placing a strain on the American taxpayer. It means you're going to pay for part of this. As it stands, Customs and Border Patrol is on track for 1.2 million encounters with illegal border crossers, which would be far above anything the country's seen since the Bush years. And as you can imagine, taking care of that many migrants can cost a lot of money. Unaccompanied children are supposed to be sent to shelters run by the Federal Health and Human Services Department, which then looks for sponsors to take them. The HHS then looks for family members already in the United States, as we mentioned before. HHS is now offering to pay. This is the key here, part of the story, to pay for flights for family members already in the U.S. to come pick up the children, even in frequent cases when those relatives are in the country illegally. Go figure on that one. Costing taxpayer dollars and creating a strain on the immigration system. All right, law enforcement on the border continues to struggle as they see no end, really, to the migrant surge in Eagle Pass, Texas. There is concern and a dire need for more help. U.S. Customs and Border Protection officials in that region said they encountered more than 172,000 people trying to enter the U.S. along the southwest border in March alone. Now, on Wednesday morning, law enforcement officials met with federal Republican lawmakers in Eagle Pass next to the Rio Grande. They listened to a frustrated Maverick County sheriff say he needs more resources to keep up with the increase of migrant activity. And just yesterday, we had the mayor of Eagle Pass on Victory News. He told us about some of the challenges border communities are dealing with.
We have individuals jumping fences, hiding in people's backyards, patios, wherever they can, trying to avoid being caught by our Border Patrol agents. It is taking a toll on local law enforcement as well. Our police department does get Stone Grant funding to help assist the Border Patrol agents. But, you know, with a number of individuals crossing, we're having to put more manpower and more resources into helping Border Patrol. And that takes its toll on our community because we still got to protect the rest of our community.
Law enforcement also mentioned one area of high concern, farm to market FM 481, Road FM 481. That is where they say they are seeing a significant increase in chases. Well, no response. That's what the Arizona Attorney General said Thursday on Fox Business, that he has received since inviting Vice President Kamala Harris to tour the border. Now, according to reports, U.S. authorities caught more than 171,000 illegal immigrants across that Mexican border there. That number is the highest monthly total in 2 decades. Greg, I'm going to toss it back to you.
Thank you, Mike. I want to go to Rick Green, constitutional expert here for us, the coach, and ask you about the breaking story that he just talked about, where they had talked about this. He and Trump, President Biden and Trump had talked about this packing the court during their debates, and everybody kind of played it off. But now he's wanting to do a group to study this. The Judicial Reform Bill of 1937, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, in the New Deal big government thing that he was doing, he kept getting struck down by the court with new legislation, and he tried to pack the court. This isn't new, is it?
It's not. We call it the switch in time that saved 9 because they were actually upholding the Constitution back then in the 30s and saying federal minimum wage, show me where that is in the Constitution. Doesn't exist. Throw that out. Regulation of meatpacking plants, show me that in the Constitution. Doesn't exist. And so they were overturning a lot of the things that FDR wanted to do. So he just kept threatening to pack the court and have 15 or however many more he needed to get his lackeys on the court to rubber stamp everything he did. Well, it turns out the threat was enough. The court itself started switching, and the same people that had said no to these expansions of federal government powers that we the people never gave the federal government in our Constitution. The court started saying yes in order to save 9. I don't think it was worth it. I'm afraid. I'm actually a little bit worried that this court may do the same thing. And I think that's part of the reason we don't have 5 solid constitutionalists on the court handing down really strong constitutional decisions.
And that's why
they're worried about the package.
That's what I was going to ask you. We've seen them kind of reverse some things that you would think they wouldn't have done. Is this a threat to get them to say, listen, if you don't do this, if you don't start passing things, I'm going to pack the court? Just
Greg,
exactly
you're
what
spot
happened.
on, man. Yep, you're spot on. That's exactly what he's doing. He's threatening them with that, and I think hoping to lay the groundwork to do that. I'm actually not against a larger Supreme Court because the court is so far outside its boundaries. It makes one appointment too powerful. So I'd be fine with 50 Supreme Court justices, but not allowing one president to add 4 or 5 or 10, one at the most, and then each next president gets one. Maybe that's the right way to do it. But right now you've got a split court, and he would be doing it entirely for policy reasons, entirely so that he could ram his agenda through and not have any of his programs overturned. And speaking of policies, Greg, we got to remember that elections have consequences. The stealing of elections has consequences. Policies have consequences. All of what we just saw on the border, that is the result of Joe Biden's policies. It didn't just happen by accident, didn't just happen by surprise. That was the invitation of Joe Biden, and children are suffering as a result of it. But that is the result of his policies, which is the result of our votes as a nation, or sometimes not counting the right votes.
Which goes to what I said earlier. If you're upset about these things and you voted for him, this is on you too.
Yep.
Right? Tim?
Amen.
All right, state health officials are calling to move to shut down a mass vaccination site in Colorado. Something they did out of an abundance of caution, they're saying. UPI is reporting on Thursday 11 people reportedly experienced nausea and dizziness after receiving the Johnson & Johnson COVID-19 vaccine at Dick's Sporting Goods Park in Commerce City. 1,700 doses had been administered when the pause was announced. Of the 11 people treated, 2 were sent to the hospital for observation, and EMTs treated 9 others on site with juice and water. The 640 scheduled patients who were not able to receive their vaccinations due to the pause were rescheduled for Sunday. Greg?
Well, what's called the happiest place on earth is finally seeing happier times. Well, sort of. Disney World in Florida announced on their website earlier this week that changes to their mask policy will start taking effect today. They will now allow guests to take their mask off while taking photos outdoors, but will still require them to wear them indoors and in most cases outdoors. The park already allows people to remove their face mask while eating or drinking, provided they are stationed in one place and physically distanced. Face masks are required for all Walt Disney guests ages 2 and up, and the park bans certain kinds of face coverings like neck gaiters, bandanas, and masks with valves. Florida does not have a statewide mask mandate, however. There are mask orders in effect for Orange and Osceola counties, where Walt Disney World is located. Tim?
Well, this next story is no laughing matter. The CDC under Joe Biden has a new epidemic that they're trying to fight. And this time, face masks won't be part of that solution. According to the CDC, racism isn't just worrisome, it's an epidemic that constitutes a public health threat, and they're working to address it. That's according to the new CDC director, Dr. Rochelle Walensky, who released a statement where she called racism a known but often unaddressed epidemic, and that her office has a critical role to play to address the impact of racism on public health. In a series of bullet points, Dr. Walensky committed her disease-fighting agency to a number of financial and other measures, including a new web portal to combat racism and health. Rick?
Oh, my goodness, guys, where do I even go with this? I mean, now racism is a disease. First of all, we're the least racist multicultural nation in the world. We need to remember that. We need to keep saying that, because the lies that are being told by these people are being bought by too many in the church. They're actually believing all of these lies. But the CDC is now going to call racism an epidemic, and the CDC is going to fight racism. This is the reason the CDC is also not only are they not authorized to do this kind of stuff, they should be dealing only with diseases. They're not authorized at all. It's not a proper federal function. States should be dealing with this. But, tell me, what are they going to do? Come out with a vaccine for racism? Is that next?
That's what I was going to ask you. I was going to disagree with you, because if we could get a vaccine, and you should wear the mask until we get a racism vaccine, Rick. I don't know why you're denying the science, Rick Green. Go.
Yeah. I think you've been watching Pope Fauci too much. Man. Oh, this is what happens when government gets outside of its boundaries. Government's a God-created institution. It blesses you when it's inside its boundaries, but boy, is it a burden when it's outside its boundaries. What's the Bible verse say? When the righteous rule, the people rejoice. When the wicked rule, the people groan. Friends, we're being ruled by the wicked right now. They're lying to you about who you are. They're lying about who America is, and they're lying about their own authority to solve problems that don't even exist.
Well, I'm waiting for the racism passport that we can prove that we're not racist. Mike, I got to throw this back to you.
All right, Greg. Greg, a big weekend for the developing relationship between the Biden administration and Israel. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin will be arriving there on Sunday to visit one of the United States' most important allies. According to the Jerusalem Post, Austin will meet with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, as well as the defense minister and the foreign minister. Topics expected to be discussed, of course, include Iran's nuclear program and the country's recent activity in the Middle East, along with what has been taking place recently in both Syria and Lebanon. Austin's visit will be the first to Israel for a high-ranking member of the Biden administration. A list of tense topics is brewing for next week's U.S.-Japan summit in Washington, D.C. Expected to be discussed how both democracies who share national security interests plan to deter aggressive acts from China and North Korea in the Indo-Pacific region. Japan's prime minister will meet President Biden at the White House on April 16th. The two leaders are expected to discuss everything from the coronavirus pandemic to the upcoming Olympic Games to regional security concerns like North Korea's continued nuclear missile testing and China's escalating assertiveness in the East and South China Seas. Well, in the Middle East, it appears Republicans on Capitol Hill have put a hold on $75 million of the renewed U.S. aid that was earmarked for the Palestinians. The Jerusalem Post is reporting both the ranking Republican member of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee and the House's ranking Republican member for the Foreign Affairs Committee have taken steps to delay the funding for the U.S. aid program. The money would reportedly be used by the Palestinians for roads, sidewalks, bus lots, emergency preparedness, adapting to climate change and community initiatives, and safe spaces to engage in community initiatives. Jim Risch and Michael McCall said this week that resuming assistance to the West Bank and Gaza without concessions from the Palestinian Authority undermines U.S. interests, and that the PA is spending millions annually to compensate terrorists while the international community pays for the well-being of the Palestinian people. The congressmen are calling for increased oversight of any U.S. financial assistance to give to the Palestinians. And Buckingham Palace today announced that Prince Philip, the husband of Queen Elizabeth II, has died at the age of 99. The prince was known for his easygoing humor, and he was rarely seen in public recently after retiring from his royal duties back in 2017. His last public appearance, however, was a military ceremony at Buckingham Palace in July of 2020. Queen Elizabeth and Prince Philip were married for 74 years. A big Republican summit in Florida this weekend. The donor retreat will take place in Palm Beach. It's expected to attract more than a handful of candidates considering a 2024 run for the White House. As Fox News is reporting, among those expected to attend include, of course, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, South Dakota Governor Kristi Noem, and former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, among others. Former President Donald Trump is also expected to be among the speakers there. Greg, back to you.
All right. Thank you, Mike. I want to bring Rick Green back in here. Rick, is all the discussions that we've been talking about with the new mask mandates at Disney, I don't know if we've got to keep our distance. I don't know why I think of things like this. We can take our mask off as long as we keep our distance to take a photograph. You better have a wide lens if you got a big group there. You know, it's not possible. And then with baseball and all the things, and now the CDC is involved in racism pandemic. We'll always have a new pandemic, aren't we? They're never going to let us get back to normal.
That's right. And don't forget, they make this up as they go. It's now been revealed this whole 6 feet thing on social distancing was entirely pulled out of the air. They just made it up without any science whatsoever. And that seems to be what their guidelines have been all along. Greg, if I could comment on the Palestinian story, I just remember, this was one of the times when I really realized God was doing something special with Donald Trump. You might recall whenever he almost immediately stopped funding. He pulled $150 million, I believe was the number. And he said, why in the world are we sending money that we know is being used to pay terrorists to blow up Jewish people? I mean, that was, and instantly I thought, this man has moral clarity that I never thought he would have. And I would pinch myself and I say, did I say Donald Trump and moral clarity in the same sentence? Over and over again it happened. But I specifically remember how he dealt with the Middle East, and instantly he knew who the good guys were and who the bad guys were. He knew who was participating in terrorism and said, we're not going to give our money to that. Now we're returning to those failed policies, and Joe Biden's going to turn around and give money that we know is going to be used to compensate families if someone from their family goes and blows themselves up in order to kill more of the Jewish people. That is evil. It is wrong, and American dollars should not be used for that.
And Joe Biden and his wife have always been on the wrong side of that. And I could tell you personal stories that how I know that to be true, but won't do that here on the news. In that thing Yesterday was Holocaust Remembrance Day all across Israel. People stopped when the siren went off, got out of their cars. We talked about it. Here's what was interesting. Two Arab nations also observed Holocaust Remembrance Day, saying never again should we allow this to happen. And that was United Arab Emirates and Bahrain. They both observed. That's unheard of for that to happen. And I say that's Donald Trump that did that.
That's exactly what I was going to say, man. That is more. We're still living off the fumes of a great presidency. Just think of all the victories for the nation, for Israel, for the Jewish people, not just the Jewish people in Israel, the Palestinian people there, the Arab people there. I mean, the entire nation had its best presidential friend, maybe in the history, since Israel was again a nation over the last almost 100 years. Donald Trump did phenomenal work for the Middle East and specifically for Israel, who we should be helping. Biblically, we're expected to be helping them and be their friend. And we're still living with the benefits of that. I mean, think of the nations that signed peace accords with them and all the things that happened. And now we're turning it back over to a president that wants to reverse all of that. Again, move back into the Iranian horrible deal. All the things that Donald Trump got us out of and moved us in the right direction is being reversed. And goes back to, Greg, what you said earlier. Our votes, what we do politically in America, has consequences. Not participating has consequences. We have to be salt and light. We've got to take our biblical worldview and infuse it into the culture, including in the political realm.
You're absolutely right, and that's why you're with us. Constitutional attorney Rick Green, thank you so much for being with us. Thank you for watching Mystery